Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor videos, Backyard Professor Prepper videos. I'm going to go out into my workshop and I'm going to make a cooking stand for my pop can stove that I just showed you in my previous video. So let's go to the workshop here, get through this gate. Okay. This is going to be fun because this little stand is really spectacular. I'll show you the tools you need, and I'll show you step-by-step instructions on how to make the coolest, lightest, niftiest, compact, and yet thoroughly usable pop can stove you've ever seen. I wish I could claim I invented this, but I didn't. But I definitely made one. It's all out of 14 gauge wire. It's sturdy. It's very, very light. You can't hardly feel its weight. It's way lighter than one of these that are empty. It's just about the same weight. And the other nice thing is, if it tips over, it doesn't come apart. And yet, you can pull it apart easily into its individual legs. 3 different legs of all the same wire. Fantastic pop can stove. So let's get on with it, and I'll show you the materials we need. I'll show you the jig you can make, and we'll make one of these for our pop can cooking adventures. Okay. This is a roll of 14 gauge steel wire that I got at the hardware store for $9. Plenty of length to make several of these stands in case you mess one up. You've got more you can make. We'll need that. You'll need a tape measurer. You'll need a marker. I like using the Sharpie markers. This is 14 gauge steel. I looked at the 12 gauge steel. 12 gauge is really thick, you guys. You would really have to be muscular and strong like me to be able to manipulate it, but this works. You'll need a rod that's bigger, just a little bit bigger around than the 14 gauge steel, because that's what we're going to wrap our steel wire around. Maybe a 9 gauge. 9 or 10 gauge steel. Then you'll need a hammer. Good old trusty hammer. And you'll need some wire cutters. Good old wire cutters. And then you gotta have a jig. Let me move all this stuff out of the way. And it can't be simpler. Just a piece of wood. On the piece of wood, you measure 4 inches. You put a screw down at the 1-inch mark, another screw at the 4-inch mark, and then another screw just in front of this screw, slightly offset. And that's it. That's the only... I wrote the information here that I got off the YouTube video. For a 3-inch tall pot, which is what I made, 3 inches tall, so that you need space between your pop can stove and the pot holder, you'll need 22 inches of wire. After making this one, I realized I'm wasting too much of it, so I cut it at 20 inches. If you do make a 1.5 inch tall pop can stove, to get a 2-inch height, you'll need 18 inches of wire. So not that big of a deal. And then if for a 2.5 inch high, you can do the 20 inch, but I find the 20 inch wire can also do the 3-inch high stand. So there's our jig. The first thing you want to do, and then of course, you'll need a trusty vise. The first thing you want to do is we will roll out a strand of wire, unroll a strand of wire so that we can cut it, and we'll want to try to keep this as straight as you can. You're never going to get it perfectly straight. We want to measure this out. Want to measure the length of this out to 20 inches. Measure it 20 inches. And I go just a little extra. You don't have to be completely exact at this. And then clip it off. So there's your 20-inch wire that we're going to start bending. Next, we're going to take our little pin, our 9-gauge pin, and we're going to put it at the edge of the vise, and you want it fairly tall, and clamp that in and give it a good whirl. Next, you take your 20-inch long piece of wire, right? And I've kind of straightened it out pretty much more or less. And you're going to put it in the vise. About a 1/4 inch is all. You're going to just make it so that it's in the vise, and you're going to bend it straight back. At this point, with that kink, you want to take your hammer and hammer that down so that it's a perfect 90 degrees, right? Then put it in the vise, and this is where we'll start wrapping. And you'll want to pull on this wire and wrap it tight 6 times. There's 1, 2. Don't worry if you don't get this wrap exactly tight just yet. Just get the wrap around that bar. 3, 4, 5. Whoop, and then bring that up and around. Tight. 6 times. Bring it around 6 times. Okay? Then what we're going to do, unclamp this. You're going to take it, you're going to take the wire roll that you just wrapped off of the pin so that you have it separate. Yes? See that little tail right there? See that little tail right there on the wire? We want to clip that off and clip it as close as you can to the curve. Just clip that off. If you need to smooth this out, we can file it, but you don't. Now, you might have a little bit of gap. You might have a little bit of gap in that. What you're going to do now is put it right at the edge of the vise. And you're going to gently close the vise and squeeze that curl down. You don't want to overdo this. You just want to snug it up. And that tightens that curl really, really nice. Okay? So we've got that curl tight. Now, we want to, with the wire on the bottom, put it back into the edge of the vise, tight, and you're going to want to bend this wire straight out. With the curl in the vise, take your trusty hammer and tap that so that you have a 90-degree turn. Perfect 90-degree turn, right? Okay, that's the first curl. On the finished one, we want to measure this shaft right here at 2.5 inches and mark it. So with the one you just bent, we're going to measure 2.5 inches over and mark it. And again, this does not have to be perfectly exact. I just start at the end of that spring come over 2.5 inches and mark it. And then what I'll do with this, I use this little Sharpie marker. I just make it easier to see. So I know that shaft will be 2.5 inches. Okay? That's the next step. Now the step after this, once I get this point marked out at 2.5 inches, is we go back over to the vise. We are going to take our rod that we wrap around it and put this back into it or onto it. And sometimes this is somewhat tough to do. So what I do is I put this edge of this back in here and tap this wrapping rod into it. Come on, come on. You can't be that hard. For Pete's sake, man! Come on, I'm in a video! Now you want to tap this all the way through, because what we're going to do now is we're going to make our second wrap. Now you can see that that's in there, right, in the rod, and you can see this mark. You want to leave enough space from your mark up to the top that you can wrap around this end of this rod, because we're going to put both of these back into the vise. The trick with this next step is very simple. We're going to put this into the vise at that mark, the 2.5 inch mark that we made. So we put it into our vise where that mark is, and we tighten the vise. Where is that mark? There it is. And we'll tighten the vise right on that mark. Bullet tightness. See, I've left enough of this rod up here that it's high enough that I can make this second wrap around this, right? So we begin our wrap, and we'll wrap this 6 times also. When you wrap it 6 times, it makes these little coils 1/2 inch. And I wrap it 6 times from the front. So there's 2, then 3, 4, 5, and you want to be pulling tight on this wire. Not super tight, but tight. Okay, now see, from this point, okay, we've got the wrap 6 times. Let me show you this closer. We've got that wrapped 6 times. You can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll notice that the nice thing is because we put this bottom, this first one that we wrapped, on the shaft, this second one, it helps it align it straight. This part coming off of here going this way, that's going to be the top of our stand. This is the one end of the leg. And now we take this out of the vise, and we're going to pull this wrapping pin out, and then we're going to use the wooden jig. So we've pulled this out of the vise. Let me back this off just a little bit. We've pulled this out of the vise, and we've gotten rid of the wrapping pin. We now want to tighten this second coil, so we put that back in the vise. This is our second coil, and tighten it up. Not too much, but just squeeze it so that it's tight. Then you check for alignment down through there. You check so that it looks like it's pretty well aligned, and you're going to make this this flare out. Whoops, sorry. You're going to make this square. See, this is your leg and this will be your top. And now we're going to do our other leg. And for that we need the wooden jig. And what we're going to do in this jig is we're going to take it like this with the leg standing up, and we're going to put this in between those two screws, and we're going to put that screw right here in the corner, nice and tight. Nice and tight like that, so that it comes to this screw, and then we bend this part up like so. So that now you've got the leg and the top. Notice how this is rounded? I'll show you how to make that more square. It's somewhat rounded. We put that back in the vise. Tighten the vise up. Take the hammer and hammer it down. And then that way it gives us a real nice 90 degree. And then you just pull that out. Try to keep this as straight as you can. And there's our, whoops. So you've got your spring on one side, the top going across the top, and now this leg is extra long. You just measure the length from here to the top of this one and cut this one to length, and that's your first leg. So now that I've got it all cut to the same length as this side, there's your first leg. Then when you wrap the second leg, you can grab your second leg and put it into the first leg. And then you grab the third leg, and put it into the leg. You put that through the holes, and then this leg goes through the holes, both holes, and voila, there's your stand right there. There's your triangle stand right there. And it's got a double support on each one of the legs as they fit into each other, and it's solid. It's rock solid. It won't come apart if it accidentally gets knocked over. It's durable. It doesn't rust, and it's solid. Is it solid enough to put a pot on it and cook it? Maybe, maybe not. But in that case, you can make an extra leg and turn it into a square. Easy enough. You just undo the one leg and you put it in this one. You put it in your fourth leg, down in there. Oh, 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 oh. Don't come out of there, kiddo. And then you put this leg in that one. That leg in that one. Oh, I bent it just a little. That leg in that one, and that leg in that one. Get in there. And there's your four-legged stand. So that you can put a pot on a square instead of a triangle. So the real question is, does this really work to help you support cooking? There's enough space in between here that the flames will be able to heat a pan or a pot of water. So there's your video on how to make one of the coolest little pop can stove holders that I have ever seen. Now, let's cook with it.